Welcome to the Futuring Lab podcast, a space where together we intentionally create the future that we long for. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Futuring Lab podcast. This week I am really excited because it's a bit of a special one for the 18th episode. I have Pete with me, Pete Russell, one of my friends, a fascinating human, the founder of Ubi and co-founder of Decent. Apologies, Pete, if I don't pronounce them properly. I'm sure you will do a better job than me. So, I originally wanted to invite Pete in the podcast because he, his team, and their whole ecosystem have created a great alternative to our current globalized, not really nutritious and unjust food system that I thought was really worth sharing. And Pete will develop a bit more on that. The funny thing is that when I reached out to Pete a few weeks ago, he told me that he had actually made a new transition to a new venture, Decent, that he will also talk about a bit more. And when we prepped for this podcast, I've realized that actually the timing couldn't be better. Because originally with talking about Ubi, I thought, let's talk about something that's established, that is driven by meaning, that aims to do great for many, many people. And when you shared about Decent, I thought actually it's almost even better because you are at the beginning of that venture. You are in that phase where it's tumultuous, where it's uncertain, where it's uncomfortable, and where often we don't really hear about. We hear about the stories that have been written, but not as much about the stories in becoming. So I'm really, really pleased that we get to do that today. Thank you, Pete, because I know it's also not an easy one when things are not set and fixed for everybody. But I'm really excited to dive into the beauty of the path that you've been taking, its challenges, the path itself, its past, and also its potential. And from what I could see, the very beautiful possible future that's coming. So let's dive into it. Welcome, Pete, and if you can maybe give us a bit of an introduction about you and your journey, I think that would be a great place to start.
Thank you very much, Alex. I really enjoyed the conversations leading up to this, and I'm looking forward to this one. So my journey is an entrepreneurial journey, and it began while I was still at school, and for the first, I'd say 15 years of my adult life, I jumped from, venture to venture to venture, and I learned a lot and I bounced all over the place, and I was just doing business for business sake because I loved it. But in 2008 is when I decided that I wanted to start a venture that was much more about just making money. I wanted to do something about our food system. And that's when I started Ubi. So Ubi is spelled with 4 O's. It's OOBY, and it stands for out of our own backyards. And it's all about small-scale food grown locally and eaten locally. And I had just actually come out of a previous venture which was doing the exact opposite. That was importing frozen pastries from Europe into Australia, selling through all the supermarkets in Australia. And so I'd just been involved in the really large-scale centralised food system, and we just had the 2008 global financial crisis. So I got to see firsthand directly how much our food system relied on a stable global economic system, and the impacts that happened when the GFC hit, how much it threatened our food security, and how so much food business became very fragile in that moment, very vulnerable, including our company. And so that was a catalyst. That was when I realised, our food system is not resilient to shock. And at the time I thought, I wonder if there's going to be more shocks coming up, that we should be starting to look at a better, more resilient food system. And so Ubi was my first venture in what is now known as impact enterprise or purpose-led enterprise or whatever. But back then, we didn't really have a name for it. It was just a business that had more purpose than making money.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning, and it was a process of experimenting. From 2008 until 2010, we just tried different things to try to understand how we would go about sort of decentralising our food system and building a different type of channel to market for small-scale food producers. And our mission was to put small scale back at the heart of the food system. So we tried a bunch of things, but what we settled on by 2010 was a business model which was effectively selling food from local farms directly into households. And what we did was we would promote the food that was available for harvest in farms that were around the city. People would subscribe to or order a delivery of that food. We would then place the order with the farms, collect the food, pack it into boxes and deliver it to the customers, which, is kind of like a veg box scheme, but it was lots of different farms. And we started, and it was very popular. There were a lot of people at the time that were really worried about their food security. The GFC, the global financial crisis, had really upset a lot of people and made people start to think about, what's the kind of economic world we live in. And so there was big demand, and it grew. It grew quite quickly, and then we started to build software to manage that business. And the idea at the time was, well, if we can build some good software and people start shopping, from their phones, the iPhone had only just come out and so on, we thought there's a way that we could actually impact the food system by leveraging new technology and helping small scale sort of reclaim market share. And so we worked on the website and on all the logistical software at the back end to help us to manage this flow of food from gate to plate. And it kept growing, and it was great. We had a warehouse in Auckland in New Zealand, in Sydney in Australia, and another one in Christchurch in New Zealand. And we kept doing that and kept growing for about 9 years. And during that time, we learned an enormous amount. We learned all about the farmers, we learned about what customers need, we learned all about logistics and all the complexities around food and food safety and perishable foods and inventory management, all of these things. It was a huge learning experience. And we baked all of that into our software. And then in 2019, I moved to the UK. And the idea at the point was to say, what could we take all our learnings from the last 9 years in Australia and New Zealand and apply that here in the UK? Because my wife is from here, and so we moved with the family. And instead of having our own warehouses and doing all of the handling of the food between the gate and the plate ourselves, we just started to make the software available to farms and local food hubs to do that with the software that we developed. And of course, the timing was just as COVID was hitting.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So that was the next big disruption. It was ironic because Ubi was catalysed from a global disruption with the global financial crisis. It survived the next 9 years with a lot of hard work and a lot of headwinds and so on, but we managed to survive and continue to grow over that period. But then when we got to the UK, and then the second big global global crisis, in this case it was the pandemic, it had another huge growth spurt. And that's when we went from 3 hubs that we ran ourselves to, well, today over 150 farm hubs, all dotted around the UK, some in Europe and some in North America, but mainly here in the UK. So that's been the journey between 2019 and today. And as of now, we have Ubi is like the leading platform in the UK for decentralising food. There's farms, small-scale market gardens, micro dairies, and the like, who use the Ubi platform. And between them, they're delivering about 55,000 deliveries a month to households around the UK.
Yeah.
And it's a viable business model for small-scale farmers and food producers to bypass the large-scale centralised food system and to own and control their own supply chain all the way to the customer's door. So it's a very fulfilling type of business. It's very satisfying. We get to work with farmers, which are the most amazing people on the planet. Small scale family farms, mostly organic, not all certified organic, but all ecologically sound. They're all practicing ecologically sound practices. So there's no food being sold on the platform that has been, synthetic, artificial sort of inputs, fertilizers, pesticides, and so on. So that's been the business and been the journey up until now. And the transition that I personally have recently taken is that with Ubi, we've really been focusing on the UK market, on UK farmers, and we've wanted to expand and spread the model and to really help to advance decentralised and small-scale food beyond just the UK. And we looked at ways that we could, enter new markets. Just like any type of business model, you want to grow and you want to internationalise, and how can we, penetrate new markets? But the business as usual sort of frame didn't really work in this situation, because we were trying to take our product from our home market into other markets where there were other people doing the similar sorts of things to what we were doing.
Okay.
And they were doing it from a similar standpoint as well. They were purpose-driven entrepreneurs that had, rolled their own solutions and built their own and sort of pioneered in a similar way to Ubi in their own markets. And so the idea of going in and actually competing with these people didn't feel, aligned with our purpose.
Yeah.
Hence the launching of Decent. So Decent is a shortening for the Decentralised Food Alliance. And it's all about decent food that you're buying from decent people who are growing in a decent way and delivering it to your door. And Ubi is, the cornerstone member of Decent, but there's also Linked Farm in Belgium, which is another similar platform to Ubi, but based in Belgium. And there's Pod in Spain, which is again another similar type of platform, but based and homegrown in Spain. And we've decided to join forces to work together to advance decentralised food beyond just our own home markets, and to build the alliance of other platforms that are purpose-aligned to work together to be able to sort of take the next step, go to the next horizon. So that's what Decent is. So Decent has emerged from Ubi, and Ubi is like a cornerstone of Decent. So I'm still chairing the board at Ubi, and I'm still involved on a week-to-week basis, not on a day-to-day basis at Ubi anymore. And at the moment, I'm spending most of my time establishing Decent and getting this next chapter off the ground and moving forward. And that'll bring Ubi along with it, as well as Pod and Link Farm and other similar types of platforms.
Wow. Thank you. I feel like I've gone with you through a journey across the world.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Pete. there is a lot of questions that are popping through my head, but I think almost like one thing that I was visualizing as you were talking is how it seems like each of the initiative that you've grown have kind of grown, like from each other, from the one in Australia to the one to UK, and then to the one into decent now, and who knows in the future. But I can really see, like just the life's characteristic of how just a system evolves itself. And it sounds like as well what I find fascinating about your story, and I'd love to dig a bit more into it as the podcast go on, but is that really positive relationship with chaos and turbulences. Because as you said, you started your first business in Australia after the global financial crisis. You made something, like it did not cripple you to some extent, or stop you. I'm sure there was a phase of it, but you've actually managed to like go with it. And then the same again, as you're saying, after the pandemic. So it's, again, I find it two really, I think, core characteristic of life: being able to adapt and then being able to evolve. So it felt like a really beautiful living system, an ecosystem that you've created and you're creating.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's a great way of characterizing it. Definitely each stage sort of gave rise to what was possible at the next stage. And each time, I think, during the journey, there's been a lot of very difficult times. There have been a lot of what we call near-death experiences for Ubi. But you're right, I guess there are a lot of times, and when it felt like it wasn't worth the sacrifice to keep going.
Yeah.
And if Ubi was just a business to make money, I would have given up on it a long time ago, because it's not an easy way to make money. But I think just the nature of what has motivated it is what's enabled the adaptive capacity to be able to find a way through when it didn't seem worth it.
Yeah.
Personally, or in the short term. But when trying to work on a bigger problem, and one that is a systemic problem, there seems to be a deeper motivation that allows for that adaptive capacity.
Yeah. And I was in that spirit of like evolution. If we like pull it back, I was wondering around, I don't know, I was curious around your childhood and around, how has that, or your environment, how has that maybe shaped as well? That is either your direction towards the food system, and wanting to change it, or maybe that, that ability and capacity that you have to adapt and to evolve with what needs to at the end change and move.
That's a really interesting question. I've not thought of that, about my childhood and how that. Well, my dad was in the army. He was an officer in the army, and we moved around a lot as kids. And so we needed to, every time we moved, we needed to re-find our feet and adapt to the new situation. I remember actually. I remember hearing something when I was probably a teenager about how the lessons you learn in one setting often can't be realised until you're in a different setting.
Yeah.
And I checked that on, and I was like, oh, wow, yeah. And I remember actually as a kid thinking how every time we'd go to a new place and I go to a new school, I was able to let go of something about myself that wasn't working for me in the place I'd just been, and I was able to kind of reinvent myself because I was not held in a box by other people who had sort of characterized or categorized who I was. And I noticed that was a thing as I went through life, going from setting to setting. There was like obviously it's upsetting, right? But there's also an opportunity to say, all right, well,
Yeah.
what didn't work that I don't have to bring into this new setting? And I think possibly there's a bit of that in the evolutionary or the sort of the adaptive and evolutionary state, is to say, right, what can we let go of? And also what can we start to what lessons did we learn during that phase that we can apply now without seeming inconsistent with who we were before.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. The lesson that you learn in one setting can't be realized until the next one, something like that.
Yeah, like, or it's a lot easier to realize a lesson from one setting in another setting, and I think it's because when you're in a set, it's never just you; it's other people. There's relationships, and there's expectations, and we tend to behave the way other people expect us to behave. So there's inertia.
Yeah.
So you may learn something, but in order for you to live that learning, you need to change, and people don't like people to change. So it's harder, I think. It's easier to adapt as you're shifting settings.
Yeah, so you've taken the changing setting as basically really a positive.
Yeah, I guess so. It's a positive way of looking at it. I mean, it comes with negatives as well, but
Yeah, yeah.
that's one of the positives, I guess, is that.
Okay. And what about your interest or love, or I don't know how we can qualify it, for the food system? Where do you think that stemmed from?
Yeah, well, I think firstly to distinguish it, I love food, so does everybody, but I'm more enamored with the food system than I am with food. So I'm
Yeah.
not really a foodie. I'm not. I don't ooh and ah over different dishes and things like that. I mean, I love them, but I don't know. I mean, I think if you think about it, like the fundamentals of life, you got air, and then water, and then food. It's so fundamental, and in terms of the most basic sort of commercial realm, food is the most fundamental.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not so much a love for, but just a deep appreciation for how it's the last thing before you die. It's like you can't, you got to, every day you've got to have some, and it's the thing that most relationships sort of revolve, food is central to so many things in our lives. And I guess the other point is just around that as a dad and as a type of person that has a long-term mindset. I just think that if we don't look after our food system, if we don't actually address it from the lens of how it nourishes people as opposed to how you can make money out of it, then we're just going to degrade it to a point where our kids and their kids are going to be not eating real food. They'll just be eating calories that are mass produced in greater and greater levels of processing and so on. And already, you're seeing the way that the food system is just moving food from actual natural substance into these units of calories that they don't even resemble food in a lot of cases. And if we keep going that way, my grandkids and their kids and so on, they're going to be missing out on something that they won't even know how good it was.
And that is in our back garden.
Yeah, and it's magic. Like, it's the most magical thing on the planet is a seed, and you stick it in the soil. I mean, there's nothing more literally magical than that. It's so magic, and it's fascinating, and yet we're detaching from it. and we're losing touch. And the thing that blows my mind is that we as humanity, we started out as hunter-gatherers for I don't know how many tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years. And then about 10,000 or thereabouts years ago, we realized that, we could actually move the food to us and plant it and cultivate it and grow food. And that system has maintained itself over 10,000 years and has been consistently serving humanity over that period of time. It's only in the last 80 years, like since World War II, that our food system has started to centralise. It's started to everything started to concentrate into fewer and fewer hands, and it's started to become more industrialised. And that's less than 1% of the time that we've been, in the agricultural era. And in that very, very narrow little slither of time, our whole food system has completely changed. It's been inverted entirely, and all of all of the impacts of social impacts, ecological impacts, economic impacts that have come out, disease and these chronic diet-related illnesses, they've all come about in this last very small slither of time. So the way that our food system is today it's very unnatural. It's not the way it operates naturally. And I don't think that it can sustain itself under this type of model. I think it needs to re-decentralise. It needs to go back to place-based food, not going back in time and not going back to a place where, it's drudgery and working in the fields and so forth, and, more than 50% of the societies out there doing that. We use technology, but we use it in a way to enhance the natural way of having food, and without depleting the ecosystem.
Okay, so on that, it feels like it's kind of a natural progression again. I love the idea of natural and unnatural kind of food system, because it's true. It feels very then easy to almost anchor it into a human reality rather than only a societal reality, the current one that we have. So thank you for that looking back. So as you said, it seems that what you are looking at is very much at this intersection between the food system and technology, and I'm sure other things. And you've mentioned that you want to use technology to enhance the food system. Can you tell us a bit more about that, about what it could look like? And I guess especially what comes in the back of my mind as well is the rise of AI and also all of the risks that have been associated to it. How do you take that into consideration? How do you, maybe in terms of that perspective that you look at, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great one. Well, first, I think we want to distinguish between the different types of technology, because I don't think we need technology to enhance nature's way of producing food. I think the way that nature produces food is fine. It does not need help technology-wise. I think that the technology is more around knowledge technology, right? Coordination technology, information sharing technology. That I think is where the technology is needed. It's more about how do we organise ourselves as humans in a way that we can produce and distribute and access food that isn't being all corralled through these very concentrated sort of mass scale supply chains that are owned and controlled by very few people. So it's more about coordination technology. It's about saying, well, here's an example. when I was doing the importing of the pastries from Europe to Australia,
Yeah.
for that I actually was running a wholesale patisserie in Sydney where we were making croissants and Danish and things from scratch in a kitchen, and then we were selling them through all the cafes around Sydney. So it was an artisanal patisserie.
Okay.
And we were trying to sell into supermarkets, but the supermarkets wouldn't buy from us because we couldn't produce enough quality and consistency and volume, right? I finally was able to wrangle this deal with this large distributor that had managed to get a distribution contract with the largest producers of pastries. And I was able to finally get myself a deal, a contract with this guy, with this organisation. And that gave me exclusive rights, exclusive access to be able to represent the largest producer of pastries in Europe and sell them into the Australian market. Mm. I was I was lucky. Like I got that exclusive deal, but everyone else was locked out. Mm. It was just me and my business partners.
Wow.
And we were on a gravy train. It was a very lucrative business. In fact, we worked way less than we'd ever worked in the past, and we made way more money than we'd ever made in the past, because we had an exclusive deal that we'd managed to get at a volume, at that level. So that's the nature of centralized supply chains. It is exclusive. Mm. It's like a very small group of people get to control the vast amount of food because they have the exclusive relationships and they have exclusive information access, right? And the rest of the food system, the rest of the players within the food system are locked out of that information, and so they don't get access to be able to play like that. Mm-hmm. So if we can build technology that disperses that information, that enables connections to be made from any node to any node, right? That opens up that supply chain knowledge and supply chain connections, then that changes the whole dynamic. Then it's an open market, right? And then then it's a free market in that sense. If you produce good food that satisfies this customer here, then you can trade with that customer. You're not locked out. And so that's the idea with the technology is to unlock those exclusive arrangements that dominate our food system. Mm. Like maybe in the future, robotics and things like that could help to enhance the human labour component of food production. But I think you'd also want to be careful there. I think definitely there are certain drudgery tasks that are very menial, and you don't want to avert from technology. If you want to use technology to help in those regards. But I think there's a balance, because there is something very therapeutic, very human, very symbiotic about people with hands in the soil and interacting directly with nature. With the microbiome of the soil and so forth. So, there's got to be a balance there. I think so. I'm not necessarily against technology in the food production or food harvesting or, that kind of space, or the deliveries. Who knows? Maybe drones will be moving food around everywhere. Okay, that's probably better than trucks on roads. But it's more about that information and coordination. Technology that I feel like we need.
It's a really interesting approach to it, because you really look at it from a systemic lens, and in a way where almost food is like information. You could compare it to information that is traveling or not traveling to a central node or to many nodes. It reminds me of almost like the system that democracy wants to do with information. Yeah. You want to have, not a centralized power, but you want to have many nodes of information where it gets dispersed, where decision can take place, where they can be also counter making sure that the power in place is also stays in check, and all of these dynamics, which every time, I mean, at the end, when something goes wrong in a democracy, it's when the power gets more and more and more concentrated, which just reminded me visually to the food system that we're in. It doesn't really feel like a very democratic food system, I think.
No, it's not democratic. No, it's a winner take all type of model, and the bigger you are, the more opportunity you have to take more.
So I really, I love that idea of then decentralizing and then putting it more into the hand of everyone, basically people who are active in it, from
Yeah.
what I understand, and using technology to enable that.
Yeah, and ironically, the technology is in some ways, the technology is centralized in the sense that, not in the sense that it's centrally controlled, because we can build it so that it's not centrally controlled, but it is I think the solution, the technology solution has to be a common protocol. It's something that we all say we're going to use this protocol in our food system, just like we use the TCP/IP protocol for the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
That this is about coming up with a solution where there's a protocol that we can all say, okay, we're going to play on that protocol. That way, the information's open and we're all speaking the same type of coordination language.
Yeah. Just maybe to make even to spit it out, who would benefit from that, you see, compared to who is benefiting from now?
Well, the people at the edges would benefit from it. If you think about the way the food system works, it's kind of like a chessboard. The way, if you can gain the central position, you've got dominant power.
Yeah.
So it's the people in the middle of the supply chain that have got the most leverage and the most power. And it's the people at the ends of the supply chain, the edges of the supply chain, that have got the least amount of influence, or control. So by sort of distributing the knowledge and the coordination information throughout the network, it's just more evenly distributes it, right? And so the ones who had a lot of power they're not going to like it as much, and the ones who have very little power are going to like it more. They're going to like it more, right? Yeah. And you're always going to have little clusters of power plays within that, but you're not going to. It won't be as extreme in the centres, as it is now. I think we're reaching an extremity now that is it's overreach. If through those last 10,000 years, yes, there's always been power dynamics. There's always been some people have had more power than others, and you'll never get rid of that. But it's just gone too far.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I had one question that came to my mind as you were talking. Are there any... Have you seen any risk to that approach?
Well, there's threats, I guess. Yeah, I mean, there's risks in. Depends on how you look at it. From an enterprise approach, to try and make a commercially viable enterprise on this sort of model or on this way of thinking. Yeah, the risk is that you don't get the kind of adoption you need for the volume of trade to make the thing, sustain itself. This type of model is all about a very low margin, very, very thin value sort of thread that needs there to be large adoption in order for it to be able to sustain itself. So there's the risk that you don't reach critical mass.
Yeah.
There's the risk that incumbent players will look at this, and when it reaches a certain critical mass, might find ways to try to disrupt it, and try to halt it or slow it down. Obviously, with technology being technologies, there's the risks that are inherent on relying on the internet and on, you know, that digital infrastructure. But I think they're all risks that you just have to absorb as part of, you know, nothing is riskless. So it's just, I don't think there's no sort of outsized risks that I feel like, oh, yeah, it's too risky.
And then on the other side of the risk, I was thinking about the opportunities in terms of how our climate changing is and my impact of food system. How do you think the descent could then help, I guess, in terms of resilience more than anything else? And another thing, can you maybe speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a far more resilient system because it's not centralized, it's decentralized, and each node is, you know, whilst each node can be interconnected with all the other nodes. If a certain region has a catastrophic weather event, it doesn't heavily impact all the other regions that don't. And in fact, regions that don't have that catastrophic weather event can rally around and get food into that area because there's not these large sort of, you know, super thick supply lines that if that gets interrupted, then a whole region is effectively without the bulk of its food for a period of time. So yeah, it's inherently way more resilient to have decentralized anything, and that's one of the natures of decentralization is there's no kind of mothership node that you take out and the whole thing collapses. It's like every node is interdependent.
It feels like a much more humane food system.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Just the fact that we can, that with uncertainty increasing environmentally, then the first purpose is not to win, but it's to collaborate and to make sure that the individual and the whole kind of stays and and have what they need as well.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I think one of the powers of today and the technology we have in society today is that we don't need to think of this as like going back in time and we're limited to just the food that can be grown in our region. And, you know, there are ways of being able to access food from lots of different regions, but just the way they get to you is more like through honeycomb lines rather than through these big sort of supply lines. So I think a future food system that is decentralized, as a human that wants to eat, you're going to still have access to a wide variety of food, but it'll be largely more artisanal. It's just more artisanal food, less packaging, less of the same thing every single time, right? Yes, it will be less consistent, but it will be just a more authentic food experience.
I mean, to a French person, you're just talking to my heart right now.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be more French. Yes.
Brilliant. So I would love to maybe look a bit more at the process, like that creation process. Where are you at with Descent at the moment? If you bear in mind what it took to then build your previous ones, or I guess with those learnings, what phase would you say you're in of that creation process? What are you expecting is coming next?
Well, it's embryonic phase, I think. It's very delicate. It's a very vulnerable space. Like I'd almost forgotten how vulnerable it feels to be starting up a new enterprise. It was 15 plus years ago when I started Ubi. It's very vulnerable. It's very fragile. There's a super amount of uncertainty. What if it doesn't work? Like, what if I put all this effort in and, but it just doesn't get enough traction? So, and you know, I think also when you're looking to build something, when you're looking to create something new, albeit it's you know on the back of something that is already well established, and you know that certainly helps. It's not just a brand new idea that doesn't have any real foundation to it. But creating something new, there's the probability of success is always way lower at the beginning. Right? It's way lower, and when you then in order to create something like this, you can't do it on your own. It has to be something where you're bringing other people to this vision. You're able to, you know, you need to be able to articulate it in a way that people go, oh, I can see that too. Yeah, I can see that. And then they not only just see it, then they've got to believe it.
Yeah.
And then they've got to do something about it. They've got to contribute to it. But then, you know, it's like, I can see it. Oh, yeah, I believe it. And, well, I'll contribute something to it. But what if they don't contribute something to it? Oh, I better not contribute. I'll wait. I'll see. I'll wait for someone else to go first because I don't want to get duped into some sort of fantastical idea that's never going to go anywhere. And then you're dealing also with like these phases of certainty. You know, sometimes I feel so absolutely the conviction level is so, you know, indomitable, right? But other times I honestly think, oh, am I crazy? What the hell am I thinking? Like, did someone just slip something into my drink and make me hallucinate? Like, what was I thinking? I can't do this. Right? It's just madness to try to assemble this type of vision. And every day that goes past that I'm not making an income from it, the more that the insanity perspective starts to build its case, right? And you're like, well, maybe I really am crazy. And so it's not easy. And I remember actually, this is almost embarrassing saying this, is I was talking to an entrepreneur probably about 3 years ago, and they were struggling. They were really struggling, where we were sitting over a table at a cafe, and tears came to their eyes because of the struggle that they were going through, you know, and they couldn't hold it in. And I remember saying, look, you just gotta like harden up. You just really need to just harden up. And I look back and I think, oh man, I was so much sitting in my position of like confidence and strength because I'd been through there and I'd established it, and I'd forgotten how terribly isolating and lonely and worrying and fear intense it is. So yeah, that's where that's the nature of something like this. I think that's the nature of this stage.
So much of what you're talking is resonating for me. So I felt like I'm in exactly in those highs and lows of, oh, that's amazing, then what the hell am I thinking? Just that can go from one day to another, that can go from 1 hour to another. You don't know what has happened, if the wind has shifted. But I agree.
Yeah, it's an existential crisis.
Yeah.
When you marry yourself to an idea that is so ephemeral, 1 minute it's there, then the next minute it's gone, and then it comes back again, and it's like your whole nervous system is attached to that. So it is a very intense experience.
Yes. So what have you, I don't know if you've necessarily, like honed on something, but how do you maybe help yourself to come out of those phases? If you do anything, or if you just wait for them to pass, but then if you do, almost, how do you keep, I would say, holding your hand through them, so that you're not tempted to just F it, I'm done with it.
It's hard. It's hard because the problem is when you're in the down phase, when you're in the down cycle, you forget all
Yeah.
the tools and the techniques. You forget there are even tools and techniques. And I think what we have is like state-dependent memory, meaning when you're in the dip, you can only remember the other dips. And you're going to look
Yes,
forward
true.
into the future and see at that same level. And so the past and the present and the future are all terrible, right? And you forget that you're caught in a dip. You don't realize you're in a dip. So it's
Yeah.
hard. So I have things like there's a whiteboard over there. Right now I'm looking at it and I've got a thing written on it saying, "What's good about the pressure?" I look at that and I go, "Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm under pressure. What's good about that?" And then my brain goes, "Well, what's good about the pressure?" Well, the pressure is teaching me something. The pressure is, exposing some information to me that I otherwise wouldn't see. The pressure is showing me something. The pressure is strengthening me. The pressure is weight resistance. It allows my mind to work with the situation in a different way, like to reframe. So I think the trick, and then the other things I'll do is, I think at night time, lying in bed is the worst time. So you'll wake up and you'll think, oh, it must be 5:30 in the morning. I can get up soon. And you look and it's 2 o'clock, and you think, oh my God. And then you're there lying there, and all the doubt demons are like, they're just on you. You're an idiot. What have you done? That's the hardest time. And then you're like, but I don't want to get up because I need my sleep. And I don't want my tomorrow to be like me walking around like a zombie because I got no sleep. But if I don't get up, I'm going to be just hammered by these demons all night. And so you pull yourself out of bed. Like last night, I got up. And I walked outside and I walked around the block. Right? And it's the only way that I could break that cycle of, and I deep breaths and looked up, and amazingly there were stars, believe it or not right now. And so it was breaking the pattern, I think that's the thing. And the other part of it is sometimes you got to listen to the fears. Sometimes you got to say, all right, what are you trying to tell me? There's a message in here that I got to know. Like maybe there's something in this that is going to inform me of an important bit of information that I've got to hear. So I really don't think there is, there are definitely tools and tricks. There are definitely little triggers like I've got, on the whiteboard, but ultimately I think it's a pretty lonely journey. You have your moments where you're sharing with others, like this moment right now, where it's like you're able to talk and you're able to calibrate. Oh, it's not be that insane if someone else can see what I'm talking about. But in a lot of the times it is a lonely situation, and I think sometimes that's part of it. You just got to carry it. There's really nothing else for it. You just got to this is my burden. If I want to see this thing come to fruition, it's part of the cost.
Thank you for being so open, Pete. And I was laughing, not at what you were saying, but more because 2 nights ago it's exactly what I had. Yeah, I think your point, when I was kind of writing down like some few things that could help also people who might be in that really uncertain either transition phase, creation phase, you do a sabbatical or something like that. It's almost that wide open space that can be so fertile for new idea, for new potential, for new thing to emerge. It's also a massive playground for our primitive brain to go, woo! What are you doing? You're crazy. You're just wasting your time. You're like all of those really protective mechanism. And from what you were saying, I've noticed, I think just as you say, those discussions to normalize that this phase is part of that journey, it's part of the evolution. I think there is no such thing as, we get to a stage where if we do it all right, then that phase doesn't exist. I think it's actually part of that creation process and part of us also evolving. Because as you say, I think it's in those phases where we're confronted to our fears or we're confronted to doubts or whatever, and where we, at the end, we go to new settings and then we can let old stuff go, like what you used to do when you were young. And I think when we are in our comfortable zone, why would we need to let anything go? Like, it's comfortable, that's fine. So I can really see how it's just part of our human evolution and also part of anything to be properly created, or not properly created, but any creation process that's not just a repetition of something that has been done. So you've mentioned normalizing it, how to break the patterns, because I think you're so right. We get into patterns of thoughts and belief that we don't even notice are here, or patterns of emotion that we just become one with them. And that can get so hard to just get us to pause, either to go on a walk, to do meditation, to write, whatever works for people, to do the washing up, but just to almost, like, again, like, increase a bit that space between those thoughts, those emotions, those patterns, and ourselves. And what you wrote on your whiteboard, it's brilliant as well. Why it's good about pressure. It would be completely the opposite of what your brain would tell you. You can't do the pressure is too high and the pressure is bad, and all those stories, I'm sure. So there was break the patterns, normalize this phase, and I've also heard listen to your fears. And I mean, personally, and also as a coach, I agree, like, 200%. I think it's one of those things where we've been taught a lot that, we shouldn't have fears, or we should ignore our fears, or something is wrong if we feel fearful about what we're building. But I don't think so. I think fear are natural, and not to say every single time we have a fear we should stop for half an hour and listen, otherwise we won't do anything. But when there is something that keeps on repeating, that feels very heavy, I think taking that time to understand, to question, to turn into curiosity towards it rather than protection, it makes a hell of a difference.
Yeah, well, it feels, I think one of the things that gives a feeling of likelihood that you might make it through is a sense that I'm doing the responsible thing. And if the responsible, if you're in an argument with somebody in a relationship, let's say you have a relationship with someone and you're in an argument, and then you realize I'm not actually even listening to them, I'm just so busy trying to get my point across, then you're not being responsible about trying to make the relationship work, right? So you got to stop yourself and say, okay, say what you're saying again, let me see if I can get this. Like, try and understand it. And knowing that also fears, a lot like a bad communication in a fight, like an argument, is not very articulate. Fears are not very good at getting across their message. They're, you're like, what? Talk to me. It's like a kid that's, I can't say what. It's like, okay.
Take a breath.
Right? And so it's hard, but if you listen hard enough and you're like, is that it? And then you can pull the meaning out of it, and then maybe the fear can sort of go, oh, well, it's heard me now. I can quieten up a bit.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so I'm conscious also of your time, and I think we're gonna gently funnel it down. I was wondering, let me see, before I ask you a question, is there something that we haven't necessarily spoken about and that you would want to share? It's either about your journey, about Decent, or maybe the future.
Yeah, I think we're going as a society, I talked about 2008 was a big disruptive global disruption.
Yeah.
It was the biggest global disruption that we'd ever had in our lifetimes, right, at the time. Biggest one before that was World War II. In terms of global, 2008 was actually really big. But we don't think it's that big because since then we've had COVID, and that was really big. That was actually, if you think about global distributed disruption, that was actually the bigger than World War II in terms of the amount of people it affected.
Yeah.
Right? So that was more than our lifetime, right? I think we're going into the next one, the third big disruption that is going to dwarf what we experienced in 2020 which at the time we'd never seen anything so big. But I think that we are entering this phase right now that has so many different elements to it: geopolitical, ecological, financial, all the AI and the acceleration, the singularity. All of this is just all converging into an experience that none of us have any preconceived ideas of the scale of disruption and uncertainty that it's going to throw on us. And so I guess the point I want to get across is that I think we need to be open to allow ourselves to start letting go of the framing, the way that we structure our worldview, and accept the fact that what we perceive as reality today is just a perception. It's not true. It's just a very convenient way of perceiving it into a structure that makes meaning. But it's all going to go away. This whole perception is about to go away. It's, using the analogy of the perception of a child in a womb, and then out they come. Their whole worldview is completely changed, And nothing about the way they perceive, or very little about the way they perceived reality before, was actually relevant. Right? Temperature's different, light is different, sound is different. The whole concept of not being part of something else, you're separate, all these aspects that are just completely shift. And I just feel that, what we're working on with the food system is saying we're going to go into such a different realm of the way that society organises itself. We need to try to preempt as much as we can a food system that's going to be able to function in that new reality, because we can't not eat. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's one of the things that happens. We don't have to eat anymore, but I doubt it, right? We're going to have to eat. And if we're going to enter into this disruptive phase without having prepared a redundancy system for being able to deal with getting food onto our plates throughout this whole thing because of massive disruptions, geopolitical, whatever it is, then fewer of us are going to make it through the process. I don't think not all of us are going to make it through anyway. Never have, never will. But in terms of if to reduce to mitigate the crisis, the degree of crisis, I think we need to, one, be prepared to let our worldviews be disrupted and shattered, and two, make sure the fundamentals, we're paying attention to the fundamentals, like food.
Thank you. And how I really like what you said around allowing ourselves to let go of the framing of our worldview, the current one. How do you think we can do that? I can imagine you don't have a secret recipe, but what are some things you think that people could do or pay attention to that would help them in that direction?
I think, first is just be aware that we live in a frame, right? That the way that we perceive reality right now is framed for us. Whether we framed it or we had society frame it or whatever, that we are living inside a frame, right? A reference, a map of the way that reality is, and just being aware the map is not reality. The map is just the map, and that's the frame. It makes it a little bit easier to accept that, and then come down to the fundamentals. Think about, okay, if if everything in society and everything in my life is on a sort of rank ordered in terms of the stuff up here is all just fun and you know, non-essential, and the stuff down here is like dead essential, you know, super essential. Think about what those super essentials are. And I think ultimately the super essentials are, number one is actually relationships. And number two is probably food, right? But relationships with the people you love and the people you are connected to is like probably the most fundamental thing. Right? The ability to relate, the ability to appreciate, the ability to be grateful, the ability to communicate, the ability to just share in moments of joy and grief and things like that. Probably your relationships, like your closest relationships, are like the most fundamental thing you've got. And then food. You know, make sure you can eat together.
Yeah, I really like the relationship part, because if I'm thinking from the standpoint of people who feel already, like before we get into that new phase or that new transition crisis, however we want to call it, there is always that squeeze point where the current currents and contexts are getting, they feel like they're getting even tighter and tighter and tighter, and that's, I think as human, that almost increases even more our perception of, you know, of something is wrong, I need to preserve, I need to safeguard, and I need to maintain what I have. And therefore it can feel at the opposite of having the space and the capacity to allow a new frame to emerge. And I wonder whether the relationships are also not a really nice bridge to actually create that capacity individually and collectively to find that, I think, that space, that energy, that hope, that whatever it is that will help us really stay open when things are getting tighter and tighter.
I think so, but like you said, when it all starts to compress, it makes relationships harder. I think it actually makes them harder, and that's why I think you've got to work on them more. Because when things are nice and loose and easy, and you're not so dependent on each other and so on, you can maintain an easier. When the pressure builds, if you haven't worked on being in relationship under pressure, then they can crack. And that's what I think is a vulnerable part is, and I don't have an answer for this. I mean, I just think that it's important.
Yeah, I would agree. So it's good also to keep in mind, I guess, I don't know, I feel like the humility of it as well. And the fact that we are all very much sharing the same experience, going through some our own scale, our own personal life, some uncomfortable things, and we can also relate through that.
Yeah.
So last question, Pete, one that I'd asked to Ebru and Andre on the podcast before.
Yes.
If you had a magic lamp, like your own genie, what are the two wishes? Three. Let's give you three, because I've given them two each because there were two, so I made four already. But you can get the full thing. What would be those three wishes that you would love to make? Knowing that you can't wish, like Adrian, my boy, told me, I'll just wish I can make more wishes. You can't have that one.
Okay. I think one of the wishes would be that my kids have the inner resilience to weather the storms. That they have the ability to maintain a sense of inner cohesion under massive disruption, and the ability to maintain the relationships with each other. That's one, which is my kids' capacity to process and deal with tough times in life. Well, I'd just extend that to my family, my family. Another wish. Well, I wish that I could in times when it's tough, that there would be something that is there to remind me that it's not always tough. You know, a little something that shines through just at the right time. Oh, that's right, it's okay. I wish that would happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but I wish it would.
Could be a good idea for AI usage.
Yeah. Wake up. It's all right. A third wish. Well, you know, I wish that more people wake up to how important it is to where they get their food from, and that they make decisions. They make more decisions based on sort of the medium to long term, impacts of their food choices. I think that would be great if more people were willing to look at their food not just from what they're getting at the price they're getting, but what they're contributing to with that food order, that food purchase.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you've. I loved your first 2 points, but also really glad that you're bringing that last element in, because I think. I mean, we speak about that a lot around climate change, around any kind of big systems that we are a part of, and how our each decision and acts of purchase or acts of care or whatever is ultimately linked to one of those big elements. And I think food is such a massive one. I mean, I can remember if it was 30% or 40% of a household's expenses is on food. I'd read that. It's like a massive amount, and having more and more of that awareness, and it's not as easy for everybody to actually make choices yet to buy the decentralized or more better foods for the planet and then for the people. But I think as that grows, and even now, it still remains a choice. Like it still remains a choice to eat less meat, but eat better quality meat, or to eat, less packaging things that comes from we don't know the other side of the world, versus eating something that is freshly produced and locally made. And I think that is such an important link to close also that cycle of food moving, also of people moving and living and creating together. So thank you for bringing that.
That's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Well, thank you for your questions. They've been really evocative. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. It was a real gift to have you on the podcast, Pete. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure it was really useful to a lot of people. Also to lift the veil on how the food system works, because as you said, to go back to your last wishes, for a lot of people it's not something that is it's not mainstream. We don't necessarily know about it, and I think that already opens up a box of what else could be in there and what can I do. So I'm really excited to see how Decent is evolving. If people want to know more about it, I'll put the links to the websites that you have, but if they want to contribute in one way or another, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you go to the links for Ubi or decentalliance.com, there's information there. There's ways you can get in touch, and over time with Decent, I think we'll be creating more ways of engaging. Okay. At the moment, it's still early, and we're still focusing on just getting our core membership base together of decentralized food businesses and systems. But in time, we're expecting that the Decent brand and story will reach further afield, and more people will be able to engage in different ways.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Pete. Have a lovely end of your day then, and thank you for spending some time with us.
You too. It was a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, me too. Thank you everyone for listening to this last episode, and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Futuring Lab podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform and to share it. Share it with those who you think might want to learn to future with us. Thank you. Bye.